Okay, this is the third time I'm gonna repeat what I said. Okay, in the beginning, people what they think is they think it's time wise. The time has a factor to it in the riba, and that's how they understand it. They say the more time you spend, the more riba you pay. So that's what they look at it. After studying the books of fiqh, you realize the time is insignificant. What is it? What makes it forbidden is because the amounts are different. You give less and you get more. That's riba. Either, regardless of whether it's over the course of time or whether it's instantaneously, those are not allowed in Islam. Whether it's instantaneous or whether it's a course of time, so that's not allowed. That's what people they come to the understanding when they study the riba. They change their understanding from the nusk, where they think the time is significant, into realizing the time is insignificant. It's not the time, it's the differences in the amount. That's what makes it the riba. Okay, now the thing is, when you buy gold, what happens is some of the ulama they consider what you pay to be gold also, because in the time of Prophet Muhammad when they made the payments, they paid with gold. So they say when you buy the gold, it has to be exactly the same. So regardless of if you pay it later or not, so no, that's the reason that's why it's conflated on that issue. I'm buying on that. Okay, let's read the. Should you read the first hadith? Hamza, should you read the first hadith, please? No.
عن عبادة عن عبادة بن الصامت عبادة بن الصامت قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الذهب بالذهب والفضة بالفضة والبر بالبرد والشعير بالشعير والتمر بالتمر والملح بالملح مثلا بالمثل سواء بالسواء فإذا اختلفت فإذا اختلفت هذه الأصناف فبيعوا كيف شئتم إذا كان يدا بيد فمن زاد أو استزاد فقد أربى.
Okay, so he's talking about the things that people that have the same thing that they have together, gold for gold. The person they have amount of gold and they're getting another amount of gold, it has to be exactly the same. Silver for silver, that's the same thing. It has to be the same. That even the commodities also it's mentioned wheat for wheat, it has to be exactly the same. Barley for barley, dates for date, and salt for salt. It has to be exactly the same amount on both sides on the transaction. If it's different, then that's not allowed. That's considered to be the riba. And then the Prophet Muhammad he said, if the things are different, if you're given gold for silver, for example, if you're given the dates for, or if you're given barley for wheat, then that's fine as long as it's hand to hand. Because you don't want to put in some credit into it. If you talk about credit paying it back later, then that makes things more complicated. So that's the other issue. Okay, so that's what the riba is. You have the same commodity, gold and gold, silver and silver, wheat for wheat, barley and barley, dates and dates, salt and salt. Those are the things that Prophet Muhammad mentioned. So it's got to be exactly the same when you do the transaction with the other person. But if you have like money, for example, and you're buying dates, then that's fine. It doesn't have to be the exact amount of the dates when you buy it. You can do that. And the time wise is a different factor, whether you pay it upfront or you pay it on loan or in payments and the other thing, that's another issue. All right, so is that clear on the riba? So it has to be exactly the same on both. And Prophet Muhammad if it's different, then that's fine, as long as it's hand to hand. Because then you put the credit into it, then it's also, sometimes that's also considered to be the riba also, if a person, they have an increase in another thing. Like for example, let's say a person, they give somebody a kilo of dates, and then you tell the other person you have to give me back a kilo and half a kilo of wheat also. You don't see that? So that's like riba also, even though it's like a different thing, but that's also increases it. So then that would be considered riba as well. And then usually people, they do that when they have the payment later on. They say, I'll give you a kilo of dates, then you pay me back a kilo of dates, but also wash my car, for example. Then that's considered riba as well, even though it's not the same thing. But that gets more advanced details on what the riba is. The riba is you have the same thing, one side is more than the other side. That's not allowed. Right? That's a difference. And people, they usually call that riba al-fadl because one is more virtuous than the other one. So that's usually the term that they use for it. Because people, they have the understanding of riba is over the course of time because that's how they look at it. They look at borrowing money, then they're going to pay back more, and they're going to pay back with interest. So that's how they see it. But once you study the books of fiqh, you realize the time is really insignificant. It's just the amounts are different. That's why it's considered to be riba. Okay? All right. Okay, Sheikh Omar, you read number 2.
So we talk about it's about decrease.
The decrease, well, then the other person is doing the riba then, right? So Prophet Muhammad said it's not allowed to take riba and it's not allowed to give riba.
Mm-hmm.
So if it decreases, it's like the other person is taking riba from you. Like let's say that you give somebody $100, you say they have to give you back 150. If you look at it the other way, that means he gives you 150 and he takes 100. If you look at the other way around, right? So that transaction is not allowed. So it depends on the point of view that you're looking at it, whether you're looking at it the person A or person B.
Okay.
Yep.
Sheikh, you read 2 and I will read 3.
Number 2. لا يجوز بيع مطعوم مكيال أو موزون بجنسه إلا مثلا.
Yes. So you have the same thing like dates, and I think he mentions raisins and raisins. So it says if you sell the food by measure or weight, it has to be the same weight. Like for example, let's say you have dates and you're getting dates, 1 kilogram of dates for another kilogram of dates. If you're going by the measure, you go by volume. Then they use a sa as a term, that the handfuls. So if you have 1 sa of dates, then you get back 1 sa of dates, and you do it by the measure. So that's what the sheikh is saying, that it has to be the same measure or the same weight, depending on what you're using to measure the amounts. Nowadays, people, they do the weight, they don't really do the measure, but you have square feet, for example, you have cubic feet, cubic meters, things like that. But usually on food, they don't go by measure. But back in the old days, they used to do that. They used to say when you fill up your 2 hands, right, regardless of how much it weighs, they would call that 1 mud, and 4 of them would be 1 sa. So they would go by the measure in the old days. So. Okay, so that's what the sheikh is saying. Even the food, it's not just riba, it's not just with the money, but with the food also. It has to be the same weight, in the same measure, if it's the same thing that you're giving to the other person. All right, you read number 3.
ولا يجوز بيع مكيال من ذلك شيء من جنس وزنه.
Yes. Okay, so now this over here is a little bit tricky. Let's say that you give somebody a kilo of dates, right? Then you say, give me back 2 sa of dates. So what happens is, you're doing 2 different things. One is by the weight, one is by the measure, and then obviously they're going to be different, right? Are they going to be exactly the same? Usually not. So he said that's not allowed. No. Let's say that you're going to buy wheat, for example. You have a basket of wheat. Say, I'll give you this basket of wheat and give me back 5 pounds of wheat. He said that's not allowed. No.
Like I will give you a basket of wheat.
Yeah, I'll give you a basket of wheat that's measured. It might be a few cubic feet or cubic inches. Then you tell the other person, give me back 5 pounds of wheat. Okay. Obviously, it's not going to be the same, right? One is going to be different than the other. Then the sheikh, he said that's not allowed. That's riba also, because they're not the same on both sides. Let's see that point? Okay. So you can't do on one transaction, you can't do one side by weight and the other side by measure, because then they're not going to be exactly the same. When you have the same thing, if you have gold, it has to be exactly the same. Silver, it has to be exactly the same. The dates, it has to be exactly the same. The wheat, it has to be exactly the same.
So what's the difference, the measure and the weight?
The measure is the volume, and the weight is the weight, how much it weighs.
Or just like you just
You put it on a scale. Put it on a scale. That's the weight. The volume is how many cups that you can put it in, and how many baskets you can put it in, how many bowls you can put it in, things like that. And you don't weigh it at all. That's the difference.
Or like, for example, if you have a spoon, like you just
Right, exactly,
outside.
exactly, exactly. Yeah. So you don't weigh it. You put the measure in it. Now, let's say like you have a bucket, for example, right? Then you say, I'll give you a bucket of wheat, then you give me back 5 pounds of wheat. You can't do that, because it's going to be different. That's what he says. So you got to use the same. You have to use the same way that you measure things, whether the volume or whether the weight. Okay, that's number. Okay, yeah, that's both. That's number 3 and number 4. It says that you cannot sell the measure, which is the volume, for weight, and then also number 4 is the opposite. You cannot sell weight for measure. Like you can't give somebody 5 pounds of dates that say, give me back a bucket of dates. So both ways around. Whether you give it to them by volume or give them by weight, and then the other person gives you the opposite back. Okay, that's number 5. That's number 4. Is that clear, Brother Ibrahim? Are you following it? Point so far? Okay, inshallah. Okay, let's go to number 5. Who's next? Number 4? No, we talked about 4. You can't give weight for measure, and you can't give measure for weight. Number 3 was you can't give measure for weight, and number 4 is you can't give weight for measure. So both of those ways are there. Yes. So if the things are different, like you have gold and the other person has silver, then you can give the different amounts. That doesn't make a difference. Any amount you can do. And you can do weights for measure, you can measure for weight. That's fine, as long as the things differ. It's not the same commodity. If it's silver, the other person has gold, and that's fine. You give more silver, you get less gold, that's perfectly fine. If you have dates, for example, then you get in wheat, the amounts can be different, that's fine. And you can even vary them too. You can do one by weight, and you can do the other one by measure also. So that's allowed if the things are different. They're not the same commodity.
So interest is based on increase or decrease based on the same.
Exactly. Yes.
But
Yes.
if the item is different,
Yes.
then increase or decrease is not applied.
Right. Yes. That's on the instant transaction. Yeah. And that's what they mean by it. That's why they mentioned hand to hand. Where it's instantaneously. Hand to hand. Yes. Hand to means instant transaction, not on credit, not paid later. Hand to hand means you give something with one hand and you take something in the other hand. That's what that means. Instantaneously. That's what they mean by yad biyad, hand to hand. Because that's problematic also, when you have that issue, when you have that. So that's why that's mentioned there. Because the thing is, in the riba, it has to be the same commodity. One is different than the other. And what's problematic is that if you're gonna pay something by credit, and then and then it ends up being more. Normally speaking, that's allowed to do that. No, that's why it's problematic to talk about that. No.
If it's different item or even if it's the same item.
No. If it's the same item, it's not allowed. It's haram, because it's the same commodity. But it's different. It's problematic because it might be considered riba. It might not be considered riba. So that's what it would say when you do it on credit. The example of this is like, for example, a car. Let's say that Brother Ibrahim is selling a car, and somebody comes and says, "I'll sell it to you for $10,000." It'll be like, okay. Then the person comes back and said, "I want to buy this car from you. I don't have the money now. I'll pay you next year." Then they say, "Okay, I'll sell it to you for $20,000, but you can pay me next year." So that's not haram. That's allowed. That's allowed. So that's why I'm saying it's problematic, when you say that you can pay it later, on the item. Even in installment payments, you could do that. That's allowed also. Like you have your car, like for example. Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, so that's why these things becomes a little bit complicated and a little bit, so you got to really study the things here. So let's say that Ibrahim says, I want to buy your car for $10,000. Then he says, okay, I want to pay in installments. In the course of a year, $1,000 every month for 12 months. Then you can say, okay, I'll sell it to you for that, for $1,000 a month for 12 months. That's allowed. That's not haram. That's not riba. Yeah, that's what the ulama they say. So that's why it gets a little bit detailed when we look at credit on it. So sometimes the credit is not allowed if it's riba, and sometimes it is allowed even though it looks like riba, but it's not riba.
So how can you differentiate?
Well, like I said in the beginning, the riba is the same thing, but the two items are different. You have 1,000 and you pay back 1,200. That's haram. That's what riba means. That the amounts are different. When you have the same commodity and the two items are different, and the time that's into it is insignificant. What counts is what matters is that the time is different. That's why it's considered riba.
So
Okay.
for instance, if I want to buy a car and then I go to the dealer and then they say, okay, we're selling this for let's say 16,000,
Mm-hmm.
and then if you pay in cash, but if you are doing installment, then if they say we give you 7 years and then we're gonna charge you like 7% of interest or 7% whatever. So is that interest?
Yeah, because what they're doing is they're loaning you the money and you're paying back the interest. That's haram. But if they sell it to you directly and you're paying like that, then you look at that as one transaction. You don't look at the other possible transaction that you could have had. You look at it just buying the car for the total amount and then paying in installments.
So
If they're selling it to you directly, but what happens is these dealerships they don't sell it to you directly. They go to a third party and they give the loan to you and then they give them the money. So that's interest, and that would not be allowed.
like they don't give it to me, like if they give it to the dealer.
No, they go to a third party, a bank, and the bank loans you the money and you have to pay the bank with interest. So that's not allowed. And then the bank gives them the money. Okay, but if they're selling to you directly, then that would be allowed. Like if you go to Ibrahim, for example, and he has a car, and you say, I'll buy the car for 15,000 and pay it over the course of 5 years, then that's allowed, no? Even though he might be selling to you 10,000 immediately, no? That would be allowed. But the dealership, what they do is they don't sell it to you directly. They go to a finance company. They get the money from the finance company, then you pay back the finance company with interest. So that's why it's like two transactions, not one transaction. Okay, but if it's directly to them, then maybe if you don't consider it to be interest, then that will be halal. It won't be forbidden. Okay, inshallah, let's go to the next one. Which one are we on? Number 6?
Number 6.
Yes.
ولم يجوز النسخ فيه. It is not allowed. It is not allowed a delayed payment in it.
Yes.
If the two types are different, it is allowed to sell how which is hand to hand. It is not allowed a delayed payment in it.
Yes. Okay, so that's where it becomes problematic when you have a delayed payment, because what happens is if you pay it later and then you increase the amount, then it could be looked at as riba. It could be looked at as riba. Like for example, let's say a person they say I'll loan you $100, then you pay me back the $100 and give me 10 apples with it along with it. You see what I'm saying? So the apples are additional thing that you added onto it, and so that's why it's problematic when you have the delayed payment in it. That's when you have that. So that's why the Sheikh mentioned hand-to-hand, immediate transaction, not delayed on it, not on credit. Okay? All right, inshallah. So because that's what the hadith says, the text of the hadith, it says if it's different, then it's fine, no matter if the amounts are different, as long as it's hand-to-hand. Okay, let's go to the next one, number 8. Or number 7.
So, we got to think about rather in number 7.
Yes,
It says, and do not separate leave before taking possession.
yes. Okay, so that's another issue that comes up. It mentions this in this topic, but this is also maybe that will affect it also. So what happens is if a person they're going to the store and they're negotiating buying something and how much they're going to pay, then what happens is they have to before they separate, they have to complete the transaction. They have to take possession of the item, not leave before that. Because in the hadith they say if a person they leave before, that means the transaction is not finalized. The person they can change their mind on it. So that's what the sheikh he said. Don't leave until the transaction is done. Don't separate from the two parties separate, but make sure it's complete, and then after that, then they can separate. Okay, this one I had to try to figure out what he meant by that, but that's what he means by it. That if the two parties are selling things, one person selling the other thing, then what they do is they have to complete it, take possession of what you're buying, then separate. Not leave and then, a few days later, a few weeks later, oh, we made this deal or something like that. That's the point there. Okay, let's go to number 8.
He wants to pay it.
What time is Salat coming?
It is now.
The time of Salat? 8:45. هي موجود 10 دقائق شيخنا. وهذه أشياء هي مهمة شيخ، هي إلى يوم القيامة كل الناس ينظر هذه الفيديو فهم اللي يعرف هذه الأشياء إن شاء الله. Okay, inshallah. So let's go to the next one, inshallah.
Exit from mashallah.
Yes. So that's where the Sheikh he made the exception in the Hanbali school. If a person they're going to buy something with money and they agreed the amount on the money, then the person they can leave it. But if it's from one item to another, make sure they complete it first, because then the person they might come 2 days later, then the person they have something else, and it's not the same thing that they had the first day. Like the dates, for example. The first day, person they got very fine dates. Say I'll give you some wheat for these dates. They say okay, but then he leaves without giving the wheat and without taking the dates. Then he comes back 2 days later. Then he's got dates again, but it's not the same dates, right? It's different, so that's problematic. So that's what it says. But in money, he said it's fine. If a person they got to pay money, and the person didn't take the money yet, then the person they can leave and then come back and pay later. That's fine in the money. But the other things it has to be done before they separate. Okay, you see the difference between the two? It's a little bit hard to understand, but the difference is because if a person they're selling commodities like dates or raisins or wheat and things like that, then when they come back and pay it, it might differ than the two things might differ afterwards. But the money is going to be the same. There's not going to be no change in it afterwards. If you got to pay the person 2 dinars, and you come back a few days later, pay him 2 dinars. It's not going to be different. But if you have to pay the person like 2 pounds of dates, right, and you come back 2 days later, give him 2 pounds of dates, it might have changed a little bit. All right, inshallah. Let's go to the next one, inshallah.
Check.
Which number?
Number 9.
وكل الشيئين جمعهما اسم خاص فيهما جنس واحد. Every two things if joined together is called a specific meaning of one thing.
Yes. So what happens if you join the two things together and you call it the same thing? It's considered to be the same thing. Like for example, dates. If you have some ajwa dates and you have some, what do you call the non-ajwa dates? Have non-ajwa dates, right? So they're two different things. But then you mix them together, you call them dates. So then you have dates. And you can't transact dates with dates, the different amounts. So that's what he means by that point. You have two things; they're considered to be different, but then when you put them together, you call them the same thing. Then when you do the transactions, you can't have increase of one thing when you give them the same commodity. That's what he means by that point. And also, he has another point in the points afterwards that where that might be different. Okay, let's read number 10. Who's there?
unless they are of different origin.
Yes. Over here, the word that uses asl. Asl means like on the tree, you have the things that are different. And what he means by this is, let's say you have apples and oranges, right? You put them together, you say they're fruits, right? Isn't that true? That's fruit. Then you go and get some other fruits. Then technically, if you follow the details of the riba, then it's got to be the same weight, fruits for fruits, right? But over here it says because they're from different also different roots. You have apple trees that are from apple trees, right, from the roots of apple, and oranges that are from orange. So then you can give a different amount of apples for oranges. That's what we're saying. Even though you call them both fruits, because the roots or the trunk are different. That's what he means by that. No, they're not from the same type of trunk. They're not from the same trunk. Okay, like another example is nuts, for example, right? You have peanuts and you have cashews. You put them together, they're nuts. Then you go and you say, I got a pound of nuts, give me a pound of nuts. You said that's okay. But then say, I got a pound of peanuts, I got a pound of cashews, give me 2 pounds of peanuts. Would that be allowed? Yes, even though they're both nuts, but the roots are different, so then that's allowed. It's not the same thing of each other. No. Okay, inshallah, let's go to number 11.
If the derivatives are different types, they differ, though mean the same lump, oils and powders.
Yes. So he's saying that you have oil and you have oil, right? So then you have the same thing of each other. But he's saying that there might be different types of oil. No? Like one of them you have olive oil, right? And the other one you have corn oil. So because even though they're both called oils, they're different. So you can have different amounts from it. You can have 1 liter of olive oil and 2 liters of corn oil, even though they're both called oil. But because they're different, then the derivatives are different. So then that's fine. Same thing with powders. You can have one type of powder. You can have hot powder. Then you can have what's the other like curry powder. Then even though they're both called powders, they're you can have the different amounts of it. Okay, inshallah, let's go to how we got. Yeah. Let's try to finish up, inshallah. Let's go to number 11 or number 12. Yes.
لا يجوز بيع رطب منها بيابس من جنسه. It is not allowed to buy fresh dates for the dry ones.
Yes. So this over here is problematic. If you have raisins and you have grapes, then you go by the weight. Then what ends up happening? The grapes, when they dry up, they become raisins, right? And then what happens? The raisins are so much smaller. So let's say you go by the measure. You say 1 bucket of raisins for 1 bucket of grapes. What ends up happening? You have more raisins, right? So that's what he's saying. So it's got to be the same, both fresh or both dry. You can't have dry for fresh. Okay, let's go to number 13.
Not even for mixed.
The same deal there. If you have things that's mixed with water, things that are not mixed with water, then the amounts are, even though they're the same, like you have 1 gallon of one liquid and 1 gallon of the other liquid, but the mixtures are different. So then you end up having more. Okay, number 14. Yes, the same deal. You have a cooked item, you have uncooked item. Rice, for example, if you say like 1 bucket, 1 pot of rice, if it's not cooked, you have so much more, right? But if you cook it, then there's so much less. So the same thing, cooked, not cooked for cooked. You can't differ that way of the same commodity. Okay, let's go to number 15.
وقد نهى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عن المزابنة وهو شراء التمر بالتمر في رؤوس النخل.
Yes, so that's one of the others. Now the Sheikh is talking about maybe like a different subject. Muzabana means dates that are still on the trees that are not ripe yet. So a person is not allowed to buy them because you don't know whether they're going to come out good or not. So that you have some type of risk over there. No, that's what he mentioned. But then he go to number 16. Homer?
Give the leeway for Ria estimating the amount on the palms.
Yes. So in the time of Prophet Muhammad, there were people that were experts. They could look at the date palm tree and determine how much dates are on there once they harvested them. So he gave the leeway for that, for a person to make that determination on the trees. And there were people that were experts on that. But he told them to reduce because you have birds that eat some and you have guests that take some. So he would tell the person that estimates what's on the trees to make it a little bit less. And he would do this especially for paying zakat and things like that, before they harvested them. So there's a whole chapter in the books of fiqh called the Bab al-Ariya or Bab al-Rukhas fi Ariya, where you do the estimation on it. Okay, let's go to number 17. Yeah, you can read all three of them. No? 17, 18, 19.
Okay. On what is less than 5 also
Mm-hmm.
to be sold by estimation
Yes.
by the account.
Yes. So the 5 osuk, if it has to be less than that, those are specifics on when you do the estimation. And the reason you have the 5 osuk, that's the nisab of giving zakat for it. If you have more than 5 osuk, you have to give zakat on the dates. If you have less than 5 osuk, you don't have to give it. So maybe that's the reason he mentions that. And then he says, what's the other thing on the second last one?
To be sold by estimation.
Yes, by estimation, estimated what's on the trees. And the last one, that you feed to your family. That's what he mentioned, those things. Those are the last points he mentioned in the book, Umdah by Ibn Qudamah. Okay, inshallah, let's stop over here. It's time for the salat. After the salat, we'll go with the question and answer, inshallah. Allah willing. Subhanallah wa bihamdi, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayk. Wallahu ta'ala alam.